Jeff Bezos appears to be amassing fortune more to establish himself as a space pioneer than to acquire a country. After all, traveling to space has been a lifelong ambition since he was a child. Even if Bezos had the financial means, he would never acquire a country. International laws makes it illegal for one individual to purchase land. Would Bezos buy a country if this were not a consideration? Probably not, in light of his prior behavior. If you are new to our YouTube channel, please subscribe and click the notification bell to avoid missing new content. Dinero Association will regularly add videos to keep you posted on the latest in business and finance. Can Amazon really buy Cyprus? Let's find out. You may have seen stories saying that Amazon is considering purchasing the island nation and establishing its global headquarters there, thereby creating its own tax haven. Saxo Bank, a modest European investment bank with a sizable presence in the region, originally published this story. We all know that this is not going to happen. However, it is not as ridiculous as it sounds, and it may eventually make sense as a sustainable economic approach. At the age of 55, Bezos has never dominated a significant market as solidly as any of his predecessors, and while he is currently one of the world's wealthiest men, he is less rich than Gates was at his zenith. While Rockefeller was content with oil wells, pump stations, and rail cars, Gates' fortune was built on an operating system. Amazon's founder and CEO have made a much larger empire. Indeed, it is unusual in the lengthy history of American capitalism. The scale and scope of Bezos' business, let alone his goals, are difficult to understand. What drives Jeff Bezos? What does he believe, or rather, what does he think? Given his global influence, these are not trivial problems. A loop of his interviews from Amazon's quarter-century existence is like hearing him recite the same unrevealing story. By the end of 2021, Jeff Bezos will have surpassed Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates and famed investor Warren Buffett as the world's second richest person. To date, Jeff Bezos is worth $197 billion. As the CEO, creator, and executive chair of Amazon, Jeff Bezos oversees a platform that accounts for up to 9% of total retail sales in the United States and a whopping 51.2% of digital retail expenditure in 2020. Cyprus was singled out as the most likely country to be acquired in the 2020 National Yearbook for an excellent reason, and that is because of its long history of, shall we say, being extremely receptive to the demands of large-scale enterprises. But the country fascinates for many reasons, not the least of which is that nearly half of it is within the EU's boundaries. Even worse, if you glance at the island of Cyprus, you might imagine it was a single tiny country. But depending on who you ask, it is actually home to up to 4 distinct entities, each claiming sovereignty over what is otherwise a very bleak patch of land. Thus, there is a great deal going on here, and the only way to make sense of it is to examine the island's finances to ascertain what is truly motivating all of these large corporations who claim to be interested in purchasing Cyprus. Profitability through leverage. Amazon is projected to generate $450 billion in direct economic activity by 2020. While this is insufficient to qualify for a place at the upcoming G7 summit, if revenue equal GDP, the firm would rank ahead of all but 25 of the world's 190 countries. There is a total of $68 billion available for play. Bezos could conceivably use it to pay dividends, repurchase shares, or reinvest in the company's next phase of growth. At this scale, bolt-on acquisitions are uncommon and uninteresting. Would Amazon consider acquiring DocuSign and thereby infringing on Microsoft's productivity turf? For most of the modern financial era, Cyprus has been marginalized, having been left on the Eurozone's periphery and falling further away during the 2008-2009 financial crisis. Officially, the entire country generates about $25 billion in economic activity each year, less than a tenth of what Whole Foods generates, and a sizable amount of the money is obtained through dubious financial techniques. Cyprus is a well-known offshore haven, with banks holding more than $60 billion. Tax revenue typically accounts for around 40% of GDP in a typical year, and the budget is broadly balanced. Amazon is welcome to expand that base with a warehouse, fulfillment center, or even a regional headquarters. That is all. If you invest $10 billion in the country each year, you will quickly gain a majority stake in the economy. Amazon pays annual income taxes of $3 billion, but the country's 12.5% flat corporate tax saves it $500 million every year. With what appears to be an impending profit explosion, such an investment would pay for itself within a decade or two. The giant then has the authority to make judgments. You can almost certainly do the same thing if your objective is to influence public opinion and policy. New financial restrictions should be created. Serve the world's wealthiest from a single low-cost location. Consider the actions of the nation's largest financial institutions in South Dakota. When local rules change, the preferred jurisdiction of choice also changed. Where is Cyprus now? Despite Cyprus' reliance on tourism, the Eurozone experienced a weaker recession on average in 2020. Tourism and domestic demand will boost the recovery in 2020 when real GDP recovers to pre-pandemic levels. Since May's legislative election, political fragmentation has increased, hampering decision-making and impeding Cyprus' access to EU recovery funds. A worse-than-anticipated decline in foreign investment due to Cyprus' citizenship by investment programs discontinuation is possible. Before the COVID-19 shock, Cyprus had a track record of strong economic development and solid fiscal management, demonstrating its institutional strength. These benefits are countered by a weak banking system and enormous public debt. Fitch predicts 4.8% real GDP growth in 2021, with 3.7% and 2.9% growth rates in 2022 and 2023, respectively. However, tourist and domestic demand will both contribute to the recovery. The next generation investments will also help medium-term growth. From 2016 to 2026, the Recovery and Resilience Plan is expected to generate 5.5% of GDP in grants and loans, with an extra 1.1 billion euros in private investment. Please share and like this content and let us know what you think by typing your comments below. Keep your notifications open, and I'll see you on our next video.